Yeah, so I said I would talk about Access ESM 1.5 and ACCESS-NRI supported release, and as we know, and as we've said in this, you heard in this meeting already, there's a bit of a gap, a support gap, I would say, because there's an existing experiment configurations and whatnot, but they're not supported. They weren't created by ACCESS-NRI, so it's difficult for us to support them. So we actually had a meeting today with the Collect CMS team, who are very keen for us to take over responsibility for that, because they're finishing at the end of the year and they really want their work to continue. Holger's been away for the whole of January, so he hasn't really been around to assist people with the problems with the scripts and the configurations as they currently exist. But the plan is to try, the plan is for ACCESS-NRI to release and support 3 configurations to begin with. That'll be the historical, the pre-industrial, and 2 historical simulations, a concentration-driven one and an emissions-driven. So the historical and the concentration-driven are already part of the PayU Access ESM that Collect CMS have done. But the emissions-driven is a new one that isn't currently a PayU experiment. Those are things that Thilo's already done. So so those 3 to begin with, and it's just because there are resource constraints in terms of people. So those are it's not that we won't support other experiments, it's just a question of doing it later once we've got everything else bedded down. And in fact, this working group will be the prime source of information about what experiments are the next ones that should be supported, for example. So what are the priorities for the working group? And definitely paleo is one of the major priorities, because I think paleo is likely to be one of the groups that use this model the longest, because of things like runtime limits and those sorts of things. So so you haven't been forgotten, but so we're just starting with those 3. So Thilo?
No, that's great, Aidan. There might be a couple more experiments already being done, but not officially, but that people have already been working on and started to work with PayU and did their own setup. So it's worth just having a big, doing a bit of a review what's already available and what's easy portable by the ACCESS-NRI as an official release if it already exists. My second comment was, if you focus on emissions-driven and concentration-driven historical, which I think is great, we should also consider the emissions-driven control run setup, especially in preparation for where we are heading in the future. Emissions-driven runs will be a lot more prioritized.
So you're talking emissions-driven prehistorical?
Yeah, emissions-driven control run. Especially, when you start spinning up the model, if you're starting to do some initial experiments, just tuning and so on, it would be good to have an emissions-driven control run available as well.
Yeah. So so you when you say control, you mean pre-industrial control?
Yeah.
Just want to make sure that I understood. Good point. I hadn't realized that was a thing. So I'll mention it to Martin, but yeah. So again,
it kind of makes sense. Then you have a pair. You have the concentration-driven pre-industrial historical and the emissions-driven pre-industrial and historical, and then you can go from there, either pathway.
Sure. Well, maybe it makes sense then to share this. I just put a link to it in the chat. Perhaps that's a good place to you can reply down the bottom. So what this is a forum topic where I've just sort of outlined the basic plans for the release, what we know so far, and it will get updated as there's more information, and it also gives people a place to make some comments. The idea also is that if there are other topics or issues on various repositories, we can we can link to them here. So it's sort of like the place you go if you want to find out information about the progress of this release. Now, initially, the plan was for this to begin, and we sort of did begin already at the beginning of February, and we were We were targeting 6 weeks to try and get this out the door. We've had some staffing problem issues and people being sick, and so it's already pushed, I would say, at least a couple of weeks beyond that now. But we'll try our best, and it certainly it could happen by the end of February, I think. Sorry, end of March. We're hoping mid-March. So, as I say, this is sort of an overview of what we're trying to do, what a release entails. And so, whereas possible, well, so we have a principle of open source development. So, as far as possible, all the source code will be available on GitHub. The source code that has under strict licensing, the we have currently on a private GitHub repository, and we're not allowed to make that public, but it is on GitHub, and we can give people access to it if they are covered by the license. And sorry, Rachel, did you want to say something?
I was just, it was commenting on this screen, you know, it's like you've got MOM4, actually it's MOM5. And
oh, you're right, it is, sorry. You're right. Thank you. I can just I can edit it. It is MOM5, you're right. My apologies. But it
and I think yes, and cable 2.4, not 2.2.4.
Thank you. But feel free if you see any issues, and I say reply or let me know if there's any errors. So this was just a sort of a quick overview of what would be required. So we need to get the source where possible publicly available on GitHub. Reproducible build infrastructure. So we are using it's a build from source package manager called SPAC. What that means is that it keeps track of all of the components for a piece of software and all the dependencies. And so when you build the model, you have a complete reproducible build. It produces a file that has all of the versions of everything that was used in that build, and we can build it again in exactly the same way. And we can test that we can still build it in exactly the same way. So it's a really good basis to go forward and be able to reproduce what we've done before, and so we also have this automated build infrastructure, so build CI, so that will be added to all of the repositories, so that when code is changed, we automatically run compilation tests. So we test that it compiles correctly, and that's a pretty standard sort of thing to do, but it's actually quite a challenging technical problem to get all of the various weird software dependencies working on a GitHub runner, for example. It used to be difficult. It's now ridiculously easy thanks to the work that Tommy and some other people in the team have done. We now have a single bit of little snippet we can chuck on a repository, and it will build all of the dependencies and build the software and caches it all, so it's all really quick. So it's frankly miraculous. So we have to have that. We have to have all the experiment configurations under version control also. So we've got an example of the ACCESS-OM2 where we've done this. So that will also have automated reproducibility checking. That's something we're currently very close to having done for ACCESS-OM2, and that's what's holding up the ACCESS-OM2 release. Once we do that, then we'll work on making that more general and use it for ACCESS ESM 1.5. So that means that we have, when we update a configuration, it automatically runs tests to check for reproducibility. If it doesn't reproduce, then we can bump the model version, and so that you'll know if you have the same major model version that it'll be reproducible between minor versions, minor updates between. So it gives you guys certainty about what you can use safely with your that you've used in the past, for example. So we'll also have a system where we're working on the system where we will nominate important releases, and we will test those periodically, like monthly, to check that they're still reproducing on Gaudi, so that no changes on the Gaudi system have affected run reproducibility. So that's using the same underlying infrastructure to do that. And so it's completely general. So we can have short tests, long tests, whatever we want. And as I say, we can just nominate which releases. So, and that's important when we have a control run that people might be potentially using for 5, 6, 7 years, that you know that when you fork an experiment from that control run, that if you ran that control run today, you would get the same answers that you did 6 years ago or whatever it might be. So that will all be automated, but we really have to get that working so that then we know that if we make any changes, that they're tested and they're all working properly. And then obviously we have to document all those things as well. We're also working on sort of full provenance checks through the whole system. That's why we use PyU. PyU has a manifest system that documents all of the inputs, restarts, and executables for every run, and it's a Git repository, so it all gets stored in Git. We also added some features to PyU just recently it generates automatically unique experiment IDs for an experiment, so that helps us identify an experiment uniquely. That's really important when we put it on a catalog so that it's easy to find, but also the plan, and again, this is still in the planning stages, haven't done it yet, is to embed those IDs in all the outputs for a model. So any model output you get a unique ID. You can take that ID and put it into, and again, this is still in progress, into a web interface that, and it'll give you the experiment that generated that, and you should be able to find every input, every executable, the source code, the build that created it. Every configuration option in the model should be captured in there as well. It might be a bit trickier to find, but it'll be in a database and queryable. So, and that comes from, experience with supporting people who need, you need to understand how the model was configured and what science options we use and all those sorts of things. And those can be quite tricky to find if you don't understand. So what we're trying to do is just connect all the dots, all that information, and make it really easy for people to use. There you go. There's the pitch.
Thanks a lot, Aidan. So will you add a link for MOM5 or?
So the MOM5, the MOM5 version that was used in ACCESS ESM is not exactly the same as the MOM5 version that's currently on the MOM-Ocean repo. And I know Matt Chamberlain has used ACCESS ESM with a version that is closer to that's on the repository, because he's got a pull request on there to update it. So I don't know. It's not really my job to find out what the source code version should be. I'm just the one who makes sure that you can rebuild it once they've told me. So other people are working on some of the details of that. And what will most probably happen is that the MOM5 version that's used in ACCESS ESM will probably become a branch on that MOM5 repository named specifically for ACCESS ESM. But currently it's sitting on, a Gaudi somewhere in a directory, and a Subversion repository, I think.
But so is it possible to just then get the link to the Gaudi repository? I mean, so that we can at least see the code?
Well, the intention is that you won't need to do that. I mean, it'll all be there. It will be filled in when the details become available, and then when it's fully released, you'll be able to, it'll be able to find very easily which version went into a model. So what happens, we'll have an automated deployment system. So we deploy from GitHub onto Gaudi. It gets installed on this project VK83, and then all of the information about that installation gets shipped back to GitHub, and there's a GitHub releases page. I can show you how it works.
Well, my question is more, if you want to know you know, which specific parameterization was used in the model, and it's not necessarily referenced in the paper one way. I mean,
I see.
With the model I use, it's very easy. You know, I go into the code, I read the code, I read the parameter I input, and I know what I've done. So it's more like, and I guess I'm not too familiar with GitHub either, you know, but just, you know, I usually look for variables and try to track them in the code to see how it happened. So it's more, you know, I'm just still don't know where to find information.
Yeah, well, so the information will be available on a web interface that you know, from that experiment you should be able to go and find all the information you need. In fact, it's not as easy as it sounds to find the particular parameterization value of an experiment. You can find it at the end or the beginning or anywhere in between. It can change, right? So what we've done is to put all of the and also there are default parameterizations. So MOM5, for example, there are defaults, and if you don't change them, then you don't have to specify them. They don't show up anywhere on your input files. So what we've done is run the model and captured the inputs, all of the parameterizations, because they're output into an output file. We grab that, and then we grab all of the model configuration inputs for each run, and we only store them if they change from the default. So we've captured the default values as well as the ones that are specified in a name list, for example. Anyway, we're going to quite a lot of trouble to make sure that you can find the parameterizations that you need, you know, the values and all those sorts of things, without having to hunt through GitHub repositories. That's the point, is not to save you that pain. So yeah, and anyway, so that's the idea. We've made some progress. We just have some prototypes. We're hoping to make more progress and you know, over the coming months. But that is the intention in the end, that you should be able to go to one place for an experiment and find out everything you would ever need to know from that experiment. And it's quite doable. Technically, it's just a question of time to get it all working.
That sounds great. Thanks, Aidan. I guess we have time just for a few questions. Anybody?
I think Gabriel had his hands up. No, it was Rachel.
No, actually, I was just thinking that the source code for the MOM5 could be available through the ACCESS-OM2, which you just did.
Yeah, we know exactly where it is. I just haven't. It just hasn't. We haven't updated it, or anyway, someone hasn't put it in a specific branch yet. But once we do, then we can find it. It's because Holger put it in here. It's there. So we've got it. We're just testing it all and putting it in the right places. So it's all quite preliminary at the moment. But I know exactly where it is. It's in here, in this build. Oh, there you go. They've got it on. They've got their own MOM5 there. There you go. That's it. So he's pulling it from the oceans, from the ACCESS ESM. Yeah, so there was a specific ACCESS ESM repository. So there you go. I could put a link into it now, but
yeah.
The idea would be to put it as a branch on the single repository, so we can run all our CI and things. But I just wanted to show you, this is an example of a build of ACCESS-OM2, and when it's built on Gaudi, it ships back and has all the locations of all the binaries in that build. So if you needed to find them for any release, you could go there and find them. But they'll also be in this in the database, the structure I was telling you about. So